sponsors Sledge, Anthony Davis, and others, appropriates $10,500,000 to certain accounts for the Metro Transit Authority, the Historical Commission, the Public Library, the Nashville Fire Department, and the Nashville Education, Community, and Arts Television. At the request of the sponsor, this resolution has been withdrawn. RS 2019-1792, sponsor Virture, approves an amendment to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Human Services to the Davidson County Juvenile Court to establish and enforce federal and state mandated child support program guidelines for children born out of wedlock. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1793, sponsor Virture, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Human Services to the Davidson County Juvenile Court to establish parental assistance court to provide employment and support services to non-custodial parents utilizing the two-generation approach. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Glover.
Just very quickly, can you, is there somebody here who can explain this to us just a little bit better? Just to kind of understand how this is supposed to work.
I believe she's coming up.
Thank you.
Latana Williams.
For the viewing audience, state your name and position and department.
Williams, Juvenile Court, Program Manager. I'm sorry. I'm Latana Williams with Davidson County Juvenile Court.
Councilman Glover.
Just very quickly, Chair. I would just like an explanation on what this is supposed to do and how it works. I'm not really questioning it. I just don't understand exactly how the benefit works. So, and that's the only question I have on this, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much.
It is, we have 3 employees. They provide assistance to non-custodial parents. They assist customers with jobs. They assist them with education, with housing, and basically how to work their way through the court system.
Any more questions? Councilman Glover? Okay, thank you. Seeing no further discussion, thank you so much for being here. All in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1794, sponsor Virture, appropriate $6,806,400 from the General Fund Reserve Fund for the purchase of equipment and building repairs for various departments of Metro government. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to ask a general services question.
She's coming down.
Thank you, ma'am.
Nancy Whittemore, Director of General Services.
Hey, Ms. Whittemore, thank you very much for coming down here. Can you tell us what the $3 million is for?
It's my understanding that it is to pay back capital money that we received in 2014. There were, it was for $15 million, and I think it was $3 million, 3 million increments for 5 times. So this is the 5th payment for that.
5th payment to pay back 15. Can you tell us what that $15 million represents?
The $15 million, and I don't, if you want to see the list, I can send that to you, but it was for capital dollars for heavy equipment, and usually that's for fire trucks, things in public works that have more than a 10-year life period.
Where are you on that fleet now? Are you behind on any money that you're owed or that can help you get up to date on fleet matters?
I don't know that I understand behind. So you want to know about our replacement, where we are? Okay. When I was here, I guess for budget, we talked a little bit about that then. Councilman Glover, we've had that conversation with him. We were at $85 million if we replaced everything on that list. We've just done some calculations again, looking at our July numbers, and we're around 93 million is where we are now.
And do you have any upcoming money that you expect? I know we passed legislation dealing with sustainable energy. I believe 3 specific bills, and you're required to do strategic planning and studying. And do you have any funding that would enable you to do that?
No additional funding was appropriated for that.
And you're going to need that funding in order to accomplish the task, are you not?
There were 2 bills around energy, retrofitting energy buildings, and the other one was for LEED, and then the other was for electrifying the fleet. So in 2 of those bills, there is a requirement that we do a strategic plan for 2 of those.
And you'll need that funded?
We would like for that to be funded in order to accomplish that. We can do it. We can do those things for general services in the buildings that we manage. But when you look at a metro-wide perspective, it's a much larger task, and we just don't have the capacity to do that staff-wise.
So how are you going to go about getting that money?
Well, I guess I'll have a conversation with the finance director.
Okay, that sounds good. I just wanted on the record that you don't have it, and we'll be looking forward to some kind of resolution somewhere where we'll have to fund that in order for you to accomplish what you have been tasked to do by ordinance. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Whittemore. And just in consideration of her, we as a body, we knew we passed that legislation without funding attached to it. Councilman Glover.
And while we, quote, know a lot of things, there's also things we don't know. So here's my question, Chair. I'm not sure who I asked this of. The $3 million out of this that they're responsible for, quote, giving back, is that money going straight to debt service? Is that going to pay down our debt? Or exactly how does that money work?
Mr. McGuire.
Yes, it's going to pay down commercial paper that was used for the original purchase of those fleet vehicles.
So we never, ever rolled any of those fleet vehicles into any bonds whatsoever. We just exclusively used commercial paper?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. So explain to me, because I know Director Whittemore tried to help me understand this. Explain to me exactly how it worked. And now that we're at the end of the 5-year process, I think is where I believe that's where we are. How do we avoid it from doing that again going forward? Because we just moved from 85 million in needs to 93 million based on what I just heard. So I don't know, that kind of sends up flares saying we might need to start paying attention to these things.
And I'm sorry, your question is how do we avoid
doing that going forward? How do we actually, I guess, manage the money better than we've been doing?
in terms of using commercial paper to pay for capital expenditure items like this?
Well, all right, so let me see if I can clarify it a bit better. We, I guess, loaned the money with a 5-year payback process, correct?
I don't know if was it 5 years? Yes, it was 5 years. Yes, sir.
Okay. How do we avoid doing that as we move forward? Because if we've moved up, $8 million in the last few months on capital needs, on equipment, how do we dig ourselves out of the hole that apparently we're in with regards to the equipment needed by fire, police, all the other departments?
So I think it is the final payment on this, if that's at all helpful. I think that what the differentiation is that this commercial paper was issued specifically for capital expenditure items that we knew were eligible to be repaid by 4% funds. So I don't know if that helps at all either, that was the differentiating factor. We knew that this commercial paper was always going to be able to be paid by 4% reserve funds. Again, this is the last installment of that.
Right.
So going forward, that would just be something we would need to look at then.
So this $15 million that was used in commercial paper 5+ years ago has just been sitting out there in commercial paper?
Yes, sir.
All right. Doesn't make sense, but okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1975, sponsor Verture, authorizes the mayor to submit substantial amendment 1 and the 2019-2020 annual update to the 2018-2023 consolidated plan for housing community development to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Is there a motion? Council-
It's 1795, not 75.
What did I say?
I think you said 75.
Okay. RS 2019-1795, sponsor Verture. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. Thank you, Councilman Glover. RS 2019-1796, sponsors Verture and Gilmore, approves a grant from the National Association of County and City Health Officials to the Metro Board of Health to participate in the Sexually Transmitted Infections Express Data Collaborative. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you, Chair Verture. If we could have someone, Mr. Sharp, to come
He's
and
coming on
explain.
down.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I'm Tom Sharp from the Health Department. So a year and a half ago, a couple years ago, we started doing a fast-track clinic for testing for HIV, particularly and other STDs, which is a fairly new process. NACHO wants to see how it works, to see if it can be expanded across the country more broadly. This grant would give us one clerical person for a year to try to do a little bit more work. We also will be able to share the information we learned from that with NACHO so that they can try to use it elsewhere.
Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you. And could you explain fast track versus what you were doing before?
So for HIV, for instance, it's a swab as opposed to a blood test. So it's quick. It's a lot faster.
Councilwoman Gilmore.
All right. I know that I guess I wanted to know, too, maybe how different these are from the other organizations that come out to the universities and go out into the communities and do the swab. I thought everyone was doing the swab. Were y'all using something different?
Well, there's more to it. It's not just for HIV. We do it for syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, all these other STDs.
Okay, and you can do a mouth swab, and it can tell you that?
Well, you know what? I'm not sure exactly the technical aspects of those others, but it's just quicker.
Okay.
It's a scaled down version, but it's good enough for these tests.
All right. It would be great if we could just know.
Yeah, I'll find out
Because if we can get a swab that would be pretty impressive
find
for
out
the
for
others.
tomorrow.
All right, then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1797, sponsors Verture and Syracuse, approves an amendment to a Youth Development Center grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Nashville Public Library to improve community, adults' readiness, and support positive child youth development. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilwoman Gilmore.
If someone could come forward and tell us about this program.
She's coming on down.
Hi, I'm Angela McElrath-Prosser with the Nashville Public Library. This is actually an amendment to give us an additional $30,000 on the Justice Assistance Grant that was running in fiscal years 19, 20, and 21 to do the needs assessment with the school-age children to see what they need socially, emotionally, and educationally in the after-school hours. And this grant was running, it's about $98,000 a year for these 3 years, but they're giving us an additional $30,000 for FY20 because there was a delay at the federal level to pass the money down to the state to come to us. So it's just a little bit more money to get that accomplished, to get those surveys and the needs assessed.
Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you. So is this only an assessment that you're doing as a library?
No, the first year is an assessment of what the parents, the children, and the teachers all see the children needing.
Mm-hmm.
The second year is assessment to see what we can already provide in Nashville, what is already out there to meet those needs. And then the third year will be the report on where the gaps are and what is needed. So year 2 is seeing what Nashville already has, who's providing what.
Okay, that sounds great. And then what other organizations are you partnering with?
They're doing all of the sites, the Nashville Zone Alliance, all of the sites of who's providing. There's Martha O'Brien Center and Vanderbilt. In fact, the survey is through Peabody at Vanderbilt, who's going out and asking these surveys in the community.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is recommended. Thank you so much. RS 2019-1798, sponsors Murphy, Virtue, and Syracuse, approves a grant from the Nashville Parks Foundation to the Metro Parks and Recreation Department to fund improvements to the Ellington Park tennis courts. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilwoman Henderson.
Yes, Chair Virtue. Is anybody here from Parks to speak to this, please?
Shanita White, Metro Parks.
If you could just tell us about this, please.
The grant is for $100,000 to fund the improvements needed at Ellington Park Tennis.
And is it funded in full, or are we matching it, or how's?
The improvements right now are about $105,000, so we'll be using capital funds to make up the difference.
What is the difference?
$5,000.
Oh, just
It was
5,000. Okay.
105.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman Henderson. Councilwoman Dow.
Sure. I just had a quick question thank you for being here. How do you all decide which ones to apply for the grants and repair which tennis courts?
This was a donation. It was a private donation. It was brought to us that they wanted to donate these funds for that specific tennis court.
Oh, okay. So this came through the Parks Foundation from a private donor.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I wasn't aware of how that works. That's good.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dow. Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm excited about this because I live close to there.
I know. You were cheering.
I know that it gets an awful lot of use, and I know that it's in really bad shape. So that should be two of the criteria when you decide which ones to get them. And I'm excited to know that there's someone that cared enough to privately fund it. So that's a good example of public-private partnership. But it definitely needs it.
Yep.
And people have been asking for it for a long time.
That's
Thank you.
probably the most excitement I've ever seen from you, Councilwoman Allen. Councilman Pulley.
Yes, for the record, it doesn't look like, according to our information, that there's any kind of local match to this. So isn't this all funded by the grant?
Well, when our maintenance guys went out there and they did the assessment, it's going to be a little bit over. So whatever else is needed, we'll put in the rest.
Okay, I see. Thank you. No
Thank-
further.
There's no operating dollars. It'll be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Pulley. Thank you so much. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? All in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1799, sponsors O'Connell, Virtue, and Syracuse, approves a grant from the Ethos Church to the Metro Parks and Recreation Department to fund transportation costs of youth field trips as part of the Watkins Park Community Center Summer Enrichment Program. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion? Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you.
Yep, she's a fast
All right,
learner.
good deal. So it's wonderful. I just wanted to see what does the process work, or how does it look for when a church applies to do the transportation?
They are just donating funds. I think that they decided they wanted to take up a collection, and it was just, they approached the Watkins Center with the donation.
Okay, and so they raised the money, gave it to Watkins, and then in turn are going to use that same money to take the students out, or the children out?
Yeah, our recreation division would.
We'll do it?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Gilmore. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1800, sponsors Virtue and others. Approves an option to purchase real property in Bells Bend for use in Metro Government's park and greenway system. There is a proposed amendment. You want me to go ahead and move the amendment first? How we want to do it? Who's Councilman Mendez?
I'll move the amendment.
Thank you. Can I get a second on the amendment? It's been moved and properly seconded. I'm going to go to Mr. Jameson for discussion on the amendment.
The amendment is intended to require that the exercise of the purchase option the actual exercise of the option require a separate resolution passed by 21 council members, and to accommodate that, to extend the closing date from July 31st to December 31st of 2019.
Councilman Mendez.
Thanks. And I just want to point out for folks watching, so the caption on this says it's approving an option to purchase, but the legislation is actually approving the purchase completely to close by the end of the month. And so what the amendment does, as Mr. Jameson said, is it would let the option go forward, but require further council approval to actually exercise the option to purchase the property and have that happen by the end of the year rather than, in the next 29 days.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Councilwoman Henderson and Councilman Glover, discussion on the amendment. What did I call you, Councilman Glover? Man, please, charge it.
It's an honor, thank you.
Okay. It's been a long day already. Councilman Glover, discussion on the amendment, or do you want to wait till we get back on the resolution as amended? Councilman Glover.
Actually, I'm not certain when to ask this particular question. And I guess, Mr. Jameson, I'm going to ask the question of you. The council member where this is happening in his district is not here. And I think, am I correct? It's Councilman Hall?
That's correct.
Okay. So if he moves to defer this tomorrow because it's his district, how does that work, please?
I believe it's Rule 8 that provides that if there is a measure that solely and uniquely affects one council member's district, he should be given the opportunity to sign. If he's not given that opportunity, he has the right to defer for one meeting.
Okay. And so what I would, Chair, given that with the amendment will now move the purchase from, quote, the end of July until the end of December, which I think is probably a good move. The other thing I would like to know is what does it do to our debt service, $9.3 million, when we've got various properties that we still don't have opened up for parks that we bought even in the Dean administration. I'm going to ask that we defer this for one meeting and then bring it back to where we can understand what it'll do to debt service exactly and how it all pays out.
Councilman Glover, I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah, we can add.
Yeah,
well,
sorry.
I'm going to
get the discussion on the amendment, and then we'll get on the resolution as amended.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Henderson.
So I'm hoping that we can speak to specifically in the amendment space what this does to this potential deal that has been organized by the Land Trust for Tennessee. And I understand that it's July 30th is kind of the deadline for them. I concur with Councilman Glover. I think we need to defer this one meeting because I think there's some misunderstanding and conflation in the community. I think you heard from Councilman Glover a bigger number than I understand this to be. I understand it to be $1.7 million. Is that correct? Both significant, and I think also the council body wants to understand this in the larger context of what's in the queue for greenways and open space. And so I feel like this is somewhat rushed at this juncture, and there is some misunderstanding. And because the deal it's no longer possible after July 30th, I think at least just a one meeting deferral would be prudent. And I would ask that we consider that prior to amending it. So I would not be in support of the amendment at this time. I would either second Councilman Glover's motion to defer one meeting or however we need to be in order.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Henderson. We haven't voted on the amendment yet. We're just on the discussion of it, okay?
I appreciate that.
Councilman Prodmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that's, so I'm a little confused. We're discussing the amendment? Oh, okay.
We haven't voted on it yet. We're on
Right.
discussion.
I've heard the date of July the 30th. The deal wouldn't be done. I'd like a definition from Metro Legal, I guess, Mr. Cooper. The option, now this is a resolution approving an option. So if the purchase is not made before July, just if you would explain that. I'm trying to get that.
Understanding of the timeline, the implications.
Well, the deferral,
Yeah.
the amendment, and then we're looking at a July 30th deadline. So, there's some dates mentioned of December. That's what I'm confused of.
I will try and answer, and Tom Cross, who worked on negotiating the deal, working with the land trust and the owners, can correct me, but it's my understanding that the option to acquire the property expires at the end of July. So the sod farm that is operating the property or has been operating the property had an option to purchase it from the owner. They are in turn assigning that option to Metro. Metro is would be paying them $150,000 for that option right. And then the owner, it's my understanding that there's a condition that it close by the end of July.
Councilman Prodmore.
So anything other than a one meeting deferral would be basically the bill's dead, the resolution would be dead, right? Because
Correct.
Okay, I can't be in favor of an amendment that's going to kill the deal before we know what the deal is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Prodmore. Councilwoman Dow.
I just want to concur what the other council members have stated. I am all about preserving green space, but I would like to know a little bit more about this. I'm still a little bit confused about whether it's the land trust, whether it's the Greenways Fund, and the questions I submitted to the mayor's office has not been answered yet. So I think it would be prudent upon us to defer at one meeting if we have that time available and get all of our questions answered before we move forward.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Dow. Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similar question. If we defer this, would we have the ability to amend it to get the language to say what it actually does, which is an option to purchase as well as the purchase? Because that seems to be the sticking point, is that we haven't necessarily advertised what it actually is. Can we substitute this resolution as we defer it and get the language to be more accurate as opposed to putting in a timeline that's going to make this more difficult to meet the deadline? So that's an option that would come with deferring as opposed to amending.
Yes.
Okay. That's helpful. That seems like a better option to me.
Thank you, Councilwoman Allen.
And one more.
Hit your mic again. Go ahead. There you go.
And if we had another week.
I didn't cut you off, so that you know.
You didn't. Then we could also get the extra information about the relationship between the land trust and Metro and who's paying for what and who asked for the evaluation that was done. So I think having that extra time to get additional information would also be useful.
Yeah, and also if we had the councilman here also whose district it is in to speak to it as well. Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted Mr. Jameson just to kind of walk us through the process about it being in the capital spending plan, and then we're approving it, and then just how we got here to this point. If you could just kind of walk us through.
So this is approval of an option that also approves the execution of the option. So the proposed amendment would do two things. Number one, it would essentially break it down into two steps. You'd approve the option, but the actual execution of the option, when you're spending the 1.6, 1.7, would require an additional subsequent resolution from the council. To enable that, you've got a closing date now within the assignment of July 31st. which would be too soon for those two things to happen. So this would extend that to December 31st. What we don't know, what I don't know, is if the owner of the parcel of the property will approve of that. I don't have that information, but in terms of breaking down the usual two-step approach into approval of the option and then approval of the execution of the option, that's what the amendment would do.
And I guess I have one follow-up question. Do we normally, it sounds like we're purchasing maybe the option to even execute it, someone's like shifting it. Is this a normal process that we normally participate in around this time in the budget cycle? Is it accounted for?
So it is accounted for. This is coming from the proceeds within the reserves for the Parks Department for parks and greenways. They have it within their budget. It's not an additional appropriation from this council. Where I think the amendment is coming from is that you will typically see if you purchased an option on property, you simply own that right to then later purchase the property at a later date. This is doing both of those steps. You'd be purchasing the option and approving the execution of the option in one step. And that's just in an abundance of clarity. I think the amendment seeks to break that down into two steps.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore. Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Most all the questions I had have already been asked. I just want to clear up one thing. I think you stated it in your answer, Ms. Jameson, but this has already been an amount of money that's budgeted that the Parks Department already has. We're not creating new debt to purchase this. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. I will confess that I'm staring at Director Odom, who seems to be nodding her head in agreement. So, yes.
Okay. Just want to be clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Pulley. Councilman Mendez.
Thanks. So first of all, I want to go back to Legal Director Cooper. I'm looking at the documents attached to the resolution, and I'm reading that the current user of the properties, that their option is good through September 30, 2021.
Director Cooper.
The current tenant on the property who has the option to purchase has until the date that you just mentioned. The owner and that tenant have told us that they need to make some capital investments if they're going to continue their business, and they want to close in July or not close.
All right, so I just want to clarify for everybody, the current option does not expire at the end of the month. The current option that the current user has lasts through September of 2021, right?
That's correct, though the assignment to Metro requires that we close or not by July 31st.
Right. Okay, but before the statement was that the option goes away after that, which that's a negotiation thing, not a contractual thing. The contractual language is it's good through 2021.
The current option holder.
Right. Thanks. And then the other thing I guess I'll mention is, I mean, at this point, I'm okay with just pursuing this amendment again in a couple of weeks if the will of the room is to recommend deferral. But it's more than just the caption being incorrect and this being the approval of the purchase. You know, after last year's budget, I decided that in good faith I wasn't going to vote against economic incentives or big purchases because I didn't feel like making what I thought was the incorrect choice on the budget should make me shy away from growth-related things. But at this point, when nobody in this room, well, nobody in the seats in this room feels like the parking is going to pass, which means there's a big fat hole in the budget to begin with, and it's a couple years running where we're playing this game of selling off $30–40 million of non-recurring assets. At some point, I guess it's appropriate that you called me Councilman Glover, Madam Chair, because I think I'm going to go to the, I just don't know how we keep investing in big ticket items pretending that there's money to pay for it, even if it's already been appropriated or not. So I might end up being a no on principle for that, but at a minimum, I wanted to make sure to bring to everybody's attention, this is not the purchase of an option. This is a close by the end of the month. So I'm happy to withdraw the amendment if everybody wants to defer, but definitely we'll be pursuing it again when we come back in another meeting.
Councilman Glover, so the sponsor of the amendment has withdrawn the amendment. Councilman Glover, we're back on your motion for deferral.
Okay, well, I wasn't certain that I made the motion, but I do want to make the
Go ahead
motion
and
that
make
we
the motion.
defer one meeting.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's deferred for one meeting.
There's a motion. There's a vote on the motion.
I'm sorry, all in favor? I was about to go on. Opposed? It's deferred for one meeting. We got the amendment withdrawn.
Yeah.
We're on RS 2019-8. Are you seeking recognition, Councilwoman Gilmore? We've already voted.
I know, and I just want clarity. Actually, it's about just about when something is in someone's district. Just if Councilmember Jameson could provide that clarity to me, whether they sign it or not. If you could just explain how that process works.
Mr. Jameson.
Sure. So if there's a piece of property and there is legislation that affects that piece of property and it's solely within a particular district council member's district, they have the right to move to defer, and it's not discretionary. It's a mandatory deferral of one meeting. If they exercise that, Councilman Hall would have to affirmatively request the deferral, and it's under Rule 8 of the Council Rules of Procedure.
And so that's something that could happen on the floor. Does it require that he be in the meeting as well, in the committee meeting?
Well, by virtue of Rule 23, because this committee deferred it, it's mandatorily deferred.
Okay, I'm with you, but if he had not, I'm trying to make sure that I'm clear about
Right, so let's say this committee approved
did not
it,
defer.
and then he went and made the motion, yes, it's mandatorily deferred.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore. RS 2019-1801, sponsors Vircher, Betnay, and O'Connell. Approves a participation agreement between the Metro Public Works, the City of Ridgetop, and the Robertson County Highway Department for the pavement of Greer Road. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1802, sponsors Swope, Freeman, and others, authorizes the acquisition and removal of 45 flood-prone properties in the 7 Mile Creek watershed. Am I on this?
1802.
Okay. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Glover.
Just very quickly, I heard you ask, are you on this? So, okay, all right, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
I was just double checking because I don't have a letter from the sponsor. So we
Thank
just
you,
want to
Chair.
make sure we're doing things decent and in order, Councilman Glover. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. Now we're on RS 2019-1803, sponsors Swope, Freeman, and others. Approves an agreement between the United States Department of the Army and the Department of Water and Sewage Services to provide relocation assistance for the 7 Mile Creek Flood Risk Management Project in Davidson County. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1804, sponsors Van Rees, Vircher, and others, authorizes the Director of Public Property to exercise option agreements for the purchase of various flood-prone properties from Metro Water Services. We do have a letter from the sponsor. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2019-1805, sponsor Vircher and Betnay, authorizes the Director of Public Property to accept easements for the public right-of-way in connection with the development of the River North Project. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vircher. If somebody in the administration could give us an update, please, on River North and where this resolution fits in the context of all the various bills and things that are going to be necessary to execute this, please.
So you may have seen the announcement this morning of the new development going into River North. Thanks to Councilman Scott Davis and others who voted to approve that. The development's still going forward. The council, I believe, passed $20 million in capital spending for infrastructure improvements along River North, along with the pedestrian bridge. So that's currently where we are, just working through the planning and design process of River North itself.
Okay, as you may or may not know, I did not support the $20 million in the capital spending plan for River North. And so what I would like to understand at this juncture as we start to see project-related, easements, access, all that kind of stuff, we have never seen, that's a $20 million bucket in capital spending. This body has no idea what that's going to be, other than Mr. Wiltshire, I think, alluded to some U-shaped road of some sort, to which I asked, is that a road that is completely internal to a private development? And if so, why are we affording them these infrastructure incentives? And so I remain skeptical about the degree of public investment in private development. And so I don't feel like it's prudent for this body to start moving this ball along when we've not seen what that $20 million in capital spending is programmed to be for. Is it roadways? Is it a pedestrian bridge? Is it the intersection? I would like for this body not to be advancing anything related to this project until we get the clarity and the transparency. We could not have $20 million buckets in our capital spending plan for the purpose of private development without some good transparency and understanding on that. So I would ask that your office pull that together. My assumption would be, if you're starting to do this sort of work about easements and so forth, that you all are well aware of all the capital spending that's going to transpire there. And so I would ask for that. And also with that, Chair Lady, I'm not sure, well, I guess I would ask, first off, how long it's going to take to get this body that information. And so my motion to defer will be in line with the length of time it will take to get that information.
We will work on getting the body the information you've requested in a very timely manner. It may take us maybe a week or so.
Okay, so I would move a one-meeting deferral on this, please.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilwoman Gilmore, discussion on the deferral.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say, I appreciate the council lady, and I do appreciate her due diligence, but I don't know that this is the particular case and that this money would not be well spent when we think about the community and the surrounding community around there. So I think sometimes areas have been neglected as it relates to infrastructure, even if there are capital or corporations that are involved. And I think we just need to kind of take those things into account. And I don't know that this is necessarily downtown. I would not consider it downtown. And I think if you ran the numbers, I looked at the demographics, it's an area that has been neglected for a while, I would argue. And I think that some of the areas may be a little more developed when you drive around town, and that maybe if this is the city's way of balancing that out, I see nothing wrong with that. I think if you just take a good drive around the city and you look at the actual infrastructure as it relates to streets and easements, some of our areas have really been neglected, and I feel like a lot of private dollars have kind of picked that up, and that our city needs to do more, and it hasn't at times. So I do not support this deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore. Any more discussion on the deferral? Councilwoman Henderson.
I appreciate Council Lady Gilmore's comments, but what I would say to colleagues is this is just one little step in a larger project. using $20 million of taxpayer money on which we have absolutely zero idea what it's going to be spent on. So I would ask us to please use the authority that we have at these various steps to press pause and get the information that the community and this body deserve. So I respect Council Lady Gilmore and what she's saying about, I'm not speaking to the merits of this project. This looks like this is going to be a great project. I'm not against this project. I just think it's incumbent upon us to have that transparency and that understanding and not just have a $20 million slushy bucket, respectfully. So I would please move to defer one meeting again.
Councilwoman Henderson, before we vote on the deferral, just can you qualify to the ECD office those details that you're wanting them to provide back to the body? So in the event, if the deferral passes, is not in vain, you're getting the information that you're seeking.
That. I would like to have detailed itemization of everything in the $20 million bucket that Metro is intending to spend in whole or in part, in partnership with the developer, and what all the various steps are going to be, for what, when, how, all that. Basic stuff that we should understand, and I would assume that the mayor's office knows at this point.
Thank you, Councilwoman Henderson. Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just kind of wanted to follow up too and just make sure that when we do this, like I said, I think Councilmember Henderson is totally brilliant, agree with her on everything, but if this is in the capital spending plan, if we do this, that we want to do this for all projects, make sure that we're doing itemizations for all of them, because I think we want to make sure that we're setting a precedent that we do it for everything.
She just gave you a thumbs up, Councilwoman Gilmore.
Okay,
Yep.
So we got to make sure. And then the second piece I wanted Mr. Jamison to speak to is how this is different from some of the other partnerships that we've had when we do it with developers, in that this doesn't have TIF money or tax incentives or things of that nature. So I think it's a little bit different in that way. So if you could speak to that.
You want to take that, Mr. Jamison, or to Jamari?
Defer to Jamari.
Okay, Jamari. Jamari, you ain't over there paying attention. Councilwoman Gilmore.
Okay, so Jamari, I wanted you to explain how this project is a little bit different than the ones that we've been doing this year. It's different in the nature of that it does not have TIF or tax incentives. If you could just kind of outline that, since we're talking about money and private development and partnerships between public and private dollars. If you could just speak to that.
Yes. So this is a participation agreement, just like others we've done in the past, similar to the yards over here where Amazon's going. This is all for public infrastructure and road improvements to make it easier for individuals as this development comes along to gain access to this. This is not for the private, just for the private development. It's for roads improvements, the pedestrian bridge, and additional public infrastructure needs for this site.
And also, I just wanted you to kind of speak to, that's all it is, and that it's not, are there any incentives involved?
There are no incentives directly for the developer.
Okay, that's what I wanted you to speak to. If you could just talk about how this is a little bit different in that. If you could just talk about, like, normally we do TIF incentives, that type of thing, and that doesn't have this, right?
That's correct. This does not have TIF. This does not have any pilots that we have used in the past. This is strictly for public infrastructure needs.
All right, that's what I wanted you to explain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore. Councilwoman Dow. We're on a discussion of the deferral. Councilwoman Dow.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, I agree. I would like to know more about the River North project, but I do understand that this does not involve any tax incentive. It's much like the Century Farm project. I think one of the things is that, as council members, I just put out there, the council person whose district that this impact is absent and not here, to fill some of these questions and answer. But one of the things I did is call around and told everybody in advance a little bit about what it was, what's coming down. It's a big project. It involves a significant amount of dollars, so that they had some insight in it. And for whatever reason, we learned about it in the newspaper. And that is just I think it's, with council members, we have to exercise some due diligence by letting some people know it's not violating any sunshine laws, but it's okay to tell people about projects in your district and potential legislation. They can reach out to Mike Jameson to look at all the details of it, but it's okay. Like I tell them, I have a large infrastructure project happening in my district. You can look at the legislation through Mike Jameson, but I want you to be aware of it, and it'll positively impact the community. So there's a way that you can give people a little heads up about what's coming down the pipeline so that we have some insight into it and not read about it just in the Nashville Business Journal. And people do have questions when we're spending a significant amount of capital dollars. I think more than anything, people want to know how it impacts other areas and so forth. And I do understand that there are some areas of the city that are neglected when it comes to infrastructure dollars, because I live in one of them. The difference between mine and a lot of other ones is that private development is paying for the infrastructure improvements, like all the water pumping stations that we're putting in, whereas we paid taxes to buy water pumping stations in other parts of the city. So it is good. I'm either way. I would love to learn more about it, but I would be willing to entertain a deferral. I think this is exciting. I would like to see more development on that side of town. So, but if it is the will of this committee to have a one-meeting deferral just to get significant information that's needed to go forward with it, I'm willing to support it.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dow. Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, while we're having a one-meeting deferral, to get information, if it would be possible and not too much trouble, to get just some information on comparable projects. I mean, the Gulch sort of seems to me like maybe it's about the same thing. How much infrastructure money did we spend on the Gulch, and roughly what has been the payback of that? I mean, it might be helpful to know, yes, we've done this 3 other times and it's been fantastic, or no, we've never done it at this scale before. If it's just possible to give us
Jamari,
some
will you
idea.
add that to your request? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilwoman Allen. Councilman Mendez.
Thanks. On that last point, I think most of the infrastructure in the Gulch happened through tax increment financing paid for by private groups. So I don't think that's going to be apples to apples. But I was going to make a similar point that while information is being gathered, it's the relevant information isn't just what the $20 million is going to be spent for. It's what's the total infrastructure spend. Participation means some by us, some by the private developer. For example, with Nashville Yards, I think it was something like an $80 million infrastructure price tag, where Metro's share was about $15 million. And we got itemized for that what the spend for the $80 million was going to be. And we also had details about green space dedication. And as I understand this project, there's going to be similar green space. So to me, it's what's the total infrastructure spend for the extended area? What's the proposed split between Metro and the developer? And I think it makes sense that there could be an itemized list for the full thing, not necessarily for the 20. And I would like to see any details that exist about what's going to happen with green space if we're pulling this information together. And really, I think the request should be whether or not it gets deferred to get that information. And then I guess I wanted to ask, we've talked about there's no pilot, no TIF, no tax abatement, no job credits for this site. And I guess the question is none are planned? None of those things are planned for this site? Not right now. Does that mean potentially in the future?
Can you, so we have it on record, Jamar, can you grab the microphone?
For the current standing, the way River North is currently structured and the current plans for River North, there are no additional plans for incentives for that site.
Has the administration had any conversations with any entity about pilot, TIF, tax abatements, or job credits for that site?
We have not.
Excuse me? It's not in a redevelopment district, is it?
No.
So TIF couldn't happen without
approval from the IDB and you all. Yes, correct.
But pilots, property tax abatements, job credits could theoretically happen for the site?
With council approval for an economic development deal, probably, yeah.
All right. But none are anticipated at this time.
None are anticipated at this time.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. Councilman Davis, we're on the discussion for the deferral.
Thank you, Chair. I'm okay with the deferral if that seems like where everyone's going, just for one meeting, as long as it doesn't slow the train down. I was just I missed something at the beginning of the discussion. Didn't we kind of already go through the whole River North spend thing? And is this just because it's the final bond or something, or what is this from what we had approved?
This isn't one of the easements. I don't know how many they're going to need for completion of the project. I don't know if anyone here from Public Works can speak to that, or.
I mean,
Tag, you're it. Come on down, Mr. Weaver.
only if you have that question, but I was just wondering what was, what we were doing here, and yeah, it's fine if we're going to have several of these, but.
Councilman Davis, he raised
Go
his
ahead.
hand. He wanted to
He
jump in.
volunteered
He
the
did.
short straw?
He did.
I didn't volunteer. James Weaver Waller Lance, and I represent the River North development team. This is an easement that we're granting to the city. That's all this is. There's no money involved in this particular piece of legislation. The participation agreement is coming to council associated with the $20 million appropriation that the council saw fit to do earlier, or maybe last year, but that's not this bill. This is just an easement. While we are happy to, again, provide all of the information and transparency about River North and what River North is doing, and when you get home tonight and turn on your television, you'll see about the $400 million development that was announced at River North this morning. This is just simply, we're providing some land to the Department of Public Works so that they can do some road improvements on Cowan Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Well, I'll just reiterate, I'm good to move forward whenever, but yeah, go with the will of the body here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Davis. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry. Would we mind having Mr. Weaver come back up one more time, please?
Mr. Weaver.
Thank you.
We have a few in the queue that's continuing to join Mr. Weaver, so I'll take it we're going to have a spirited discussion. Councilman Glover.
Actually, mine's really not. So what I was trying to understand, so this is them giving the easement to the city. So the way I understand it is in order for the city to be able to take care of it after the improvements are done, this is required for them to provide it to the city. Because if they didn't, maybe that's the question I'm really trying to ask. If we didn't get this easement, then what would occur on this particular improvement they're doing? That may be a bad way to ask the question, but I guess, Chair, if that makes sense.
I know Glover language, so it makes sense to me.
She'll translate it
Mr.
for you.
Weaver. He's ultimately asking what would happen to the public right-of-way in the event, who would maintain it?
Well, the public right-of-way that's being dedicated here is right-of-way, I believe, for bike lanes and sidewalks. I don't have the actual in front of me, but I believe that is what it's for. It's intended to be part of the public domain, the public right-of-way, either on Cowan or on Cherokee Boulevard, I think is the other street that's involved in this this phase of the project. And so the idea is that the council has appropriated money to do certain types of infrastructure work there. We'll be doing that work through a participation agreement. But before we start that work, eventually all of this infrastructure will be dedicated to the city. It'll be city infrastructure, and so that's what this is. I'm looking up at Mr. Cooper. If he's very good, he's nodding his head the appropriate way. So that's what this is.
And Mr. Weaver, Glover language again, if we did not accept the easement, what would happen?
I don't think Public Works would be comfortable with us going forward and developing infrastructure that'll eventually be the city's if the city's not willing to accept the dedication.
So if I may, legal counsel Cooper, so correct, in order for this project to go on, this is a necessary step?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Councilman Pridemore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions, well, two statements, really. One being, Mr. Weaver stated that information was given out again, which is indicates to me there's some information that's already been issued to people who's interested in or who has, I guess, inquired about it. And second thing is what Mr. Weaver stated. We are voting only, a motion to defer only the authorization to accept a public right-of-way, where I know there's money involved in giving land and taking land, but there's no actual, like I think my colleague mentioned, $20 million involved in this resolution. If I'm correct, is that correct, Mr. Jameson or Madam Chair? So why would we want to defer something that is inevitably going to need to be done before we can move forward? And then the questions involving the financial issues of it, financial end, they can either be answered before the next phase that needs to be answered by council, or it can be that day when it's presented to us. And then if you need more information, we can defer. But deferring just accepting an easement with no financial burden, I just don't see why we can't move forward with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilman Pridmore. Councilman Mendez.
We've probably talked enough about it, so I'll let it go.
Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you. But no, I think that all the colleagues have made a good point, and I would just ask that we move forward, because once again, we talk about nothing more can speak to the importance of bike lanes and everyone in every neighborhood having the opportunity to be safe when you talk about pedestrians and the opportunities. And some of the districts are built up so well, and we just really would like, if we have the opportunity as a city, to have a partnership to make sure that all pedestrians and all residents are safe no matter what part of the city they're in. And so I think that Councilmember Pridmore made the best argument for it. There is no money tied with it right now, so I ask that we would not defer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore. Councilman Mendez, changed your mind?
I did, sorry. I just want to make the point that from my perspective, as far as economic incentives go, participation agreements when we're downtown and around downtown is the best possible option if we're going to do an economic incentive at all. Unlike TIF, if we do a participation agreement, we're buying discrete pieces of infrastructure and then keeping all the property tax revenue from the get-go and throughout. And so that, if we're going to do economic incentive, that around downtown where there's no risk of, we know the area is going to appreciate in value, that's the way to go. I do agree with Council Lady Henderson that, like with Nashville Yards, we do need to get to the actual itemized list of what the developer's paying, what we're paying, what all is being purchased, rather than generically talking about the $20 million. I'm pretty indifferent about whether it gets deferred or not, but we do need to get that figured out so we can move this forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I just wanted to circle back after Councilman Pridmore and Council Lady Gilmore's expressing that they were not going to support the deferral, and just remind colleagues that this is how the horse gets out of the barn. This is one piece of a larger $400 million development. So I acknowledge that this piece may seem insignificant or necessary and or whatever, but if we just solely think about this one piece, and if we just go piece by piece by piece by piece, because at the time it sounds fine, I'm not asserting that there's anything wrong with this. I just think it's important when we have a deal like this that is going to have an infrastructure participation agreement and that things are getting set in motion. These easements are for the purposes of the future things that are going to be part of the infrastructure participation agreement. Thus, that is why here it's prudent for us, please, to press pause so that we can get the information from the mayor's office and that we all are operating off the same set of information as we think about how to move forward on this. I have no doubt this will be a wonderful project with lots of bike lanes and sidewalks, but we can't just drop the words bike lanes and sidewalks and then say, hey, let's move on ahead with things, okay? I would really appreciate support on this, colleagues. I think this is just a good way for us to make sure that we don't get started on something without all having the same set of information. I look forward to seeing all the great things that are going to be a part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Henderson. Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to see when would that agreement come forward with that ties in the finances? When we would expect that? When would the financial piece become a part? Yeah, the participation.
We don't know yet.
Okay. So we don't know that, but in how many more council meetings, thank you, do we have Councilman Attorney Jamison? I apologize. So we have 4 meetings left, okay. And so this is just the one resolution. We don't know when the financial pieces come in before us. I would say that we move forward and you still have an opportunity. I think that due diligence is always important, and Jamari has agreed to give us the information as it relates to the itemized. We're not asking that we don't have that, but we're just saying on this part, we can go ahead and move forward. And on the participation agreement, if we need to slow it down, we can, especially with there only being 4 meetings left. And is the 4 meetings you're counting this one coming up Tuesday, or so it's really 3 meetings then left? No, 4 meetings count this one. Just talk to me, it's fine.
Yeah, so Tuesday, I'm counting tomorrow's meeting.
Okay.
I'm counting that one, there are 4 left.
Okay, so there's 4 left after that. All right, thank you.
No, there's 3 left after that.
That's what I'm
Total of
asking.
4.
You're trying to confuse me. So there's 3 left. Okay, so I would ask that we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore. Now, Mr. Jamison, that is 4 minus 1, so we're at 3. Okay.
So there's a meeting tomorrow, there's a meeting July 16th, there's a meeting August 6th, and a meeting August 20th.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jamison. Councilman Glover. Okay, so we're taking the vote on the deferral. All in favor? Opposed? No. Okay, so we're going to need show of hands. This is, we're voting on the motion for a 1-meeting deferral. All in favor? Raise your hands high.
2.
Opposed?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 to 2 fails. One not voting.
Motion for a 1-meeting deferral fails. 7 against, 2 for, 1 not voting. So we're back on the original motion for approval. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 9.
4, 1
Yep.
against.
Resolution is recommended, 9 for, 1 against. Now we're on bills on second reading and public hearing. We have BL 2019-1645, sponsors Mendez, Cooper, and others, approves an amendment to the Art Center redevelopment, the Bordeaux redevelopment, the Casey Place redevelopment, Central State, the Jefferson Street, Phillips Jackson, the Rutledge Hill development, and Skyline redevelopment plans. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilman, are you going to seek recognition, Councilman Mendez? I got you. Councilman Mendez.
I'm sorry, what bill is this?
BL 2019-1645.
I would have thought we would have done 1320 first.
This is how it's on the agenda.
It's on public hearing.
Okay, so 1645, Mr. Jamison, that's the one that needs to be deferred for 1 meeting because the mailing didn't go out.
Correct.
So we're going to have it on July 16. So move to defer for 1 meeting.
Correct.
Thank you so much, Councilman Mendez. Councilwoman Allen, discussion on the 1-meeting deferral.
It is not on the deferral. It's sort of on the collective, all of the bills relating to TIF projects. So if I can just ask that we get that at some point. I don't have anything to say specifically about the deferral.
I don't understand
I'm
what
just
you're
going to
asking.
ask the sponsor if he will sort of tell us how all these, there's 4 or 5 of them fit together, and it seems like some are creating it for existing ones and some are providing for future ones to be done the same way. And I would just love to know if I've got the big picture right. So
Okay.
it doesn't need to be done now, but sometime during the bills that we're going to be discussing. Thank you.
We'll let him do it now, and he can go and do it again when they come back up also.
Yeah.
Councilman Mendez, do you want to start with your committee and just bring her up to speed?
I'll give the Cliff Notes version this time and probably come up with something printed before the next meeting. I was going to do that, but I knew it was going to defer. All of them are going to be deferred today because of the administrative mess up on getting the mailing out. So there's two groups of bills, some that are left over from last fall that I'm keeping around as a fallback. And then there's some that are new now. The only two that are new now that I think the various sponsors would like to pass, one is for existing plans and one is for future plans that that get created, but they require exactly the same things. And so I think there's maybe 2 or 3 that are left over from last fall that would be the fallback, and I intend to continue to defer those to leave those as an option, because I think at least one of those we were ready to pass at the time. So anyway, that's the Cliff Notes version.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. There's a motion for a one-meeting deferral. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, bill is deferred for one meeting at the request of the sponsor. Now we're on bills on second reading. BL 2018-1320, sponsor Councilman Mendez. Councilman Mendez. Oh, let me read it. Approves an amendment to the Rutledge Hill Development Plan.
This is one that's left over from last fall. If the recently filed legislation passes, this one would be withdrawn. For now, move to defer one meeting.
There's a motion to defer and a second. Any discussion on the deferral? I see y'all flipping through your agenda, so okay. We're on 2018-1320. This is a bill from last year. It's on second reading, Councilwoman Allen. It's on second reading, Councilman Glover. Okay. The sponsor has requested a one-meeting deferral. No discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, bill is deferred for one meeting. BL 2018-1328, sponsors Mendez and Cooper, amends the Metro Code regarding tax increment finance and development and redevelopment plans. Councilman Mendez.
I'm going to move to defer this one, and for explanation, this is one of the ones left over from last fall. If the more recently filed legislation passes, this one would be withdrawn, but for now, move to defer one meeting.
It's been moved for one meeting deferral and seconded. Any discussion on a deferral? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Bill is deferred for one meeting. BL 2019-1524, sponsors Virtual Hall, amends the Metro Code regarding definitions of qualified company and qualified project and eligibility for economic and community development incentive grants. I would like a deferral with a re-referral back to Budget and Finance. It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Bill is deferred with a re-referral back to Budget and Finance. BL 2019-1630, sponsors Mendez, Cooper, and others, amends the Metro Code pertaining to the requirements for tax increment financing plans. Councilman Mendez.
I'll move to defer this one meeting with the brief explanation that, so this is a new one filed in May. This goes hand in hand with BL 2019-1645, while 1645 would amend all the existing redevelopment plans. This 1630 would set the ground rules for future redevelopment plans that are not yet in existence. So with that, move for a one meeting deferral.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the one meeting deferral? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Bill is deferred for one meeting. We're on substitute bill 2019-1643. Councilman Hall requires all existing culverts, inlets, storm drains, and ditches within the T2 rural neighborhood policy, T3 suburban neighborhood policy to be upgraded, retrofitted, and or constructed to current stormwater management manual standards by January 1, 2025. I do not have a letter from the sponsor. It's deferred by rule. BL 2019-1655, sponsors Anthony Davis, Allen, and others, amends the Metro Code regarding disclosure requirements for economic and community development incentive grants agreements. Councilman Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'll make an approval motion and then talk about it a little bit.
Go ahead and move it.
Move approval with comments.
It's been moved and seconded.
So yeah, this just had a few comments, and then I'm sure people have questions or anything like that. And Mr. Jameson may help me out along the way. But basically, this was the tweaks we're trying to make to the Do Better bill. We're affectionately calling it the Do Even Better bill, but we are, as I say, tightening, not strengthening it. We're just trying to tighten the things. You know, we went through the two incentives since the Do Better bill with Alliance Bernstein and then Amazon, of course. The first thing I'll mention was, you know, we had a lot of discussion about the local hire issue. And there was, you know, just when we were going through the process, there was a lot about, well, you know, are you really, I think what our neighbors want to know is, are you really hiring Nashvillians on the ground that are just already here? And for, you know, when you're going through the incentive process, people are kind of moving here all along the way. So it's hard to tell, you know, if your company, well, if they've already moved here, then they do live in Davidson County. So, you know, met with Jamari recently, and we've talked about these issues and everything, and kind of where we landed on that was we really just want to know the relocation percentage of the company. So that's the language we put in there was, can we have your relocation percentage, basically? And I think that's what our constituents want to know is, how many are you moving here and how many are you hiring here? I think that's the general, at least that's what I hear out there in the marketplace, from our constituents in our meetings. Then another thing we did was median wage, and I think instead of average wage, we're asking for the median wage. I believe that's what Alliance and Amazon did, if I'm not mistaken. I think they sort of did that through discussions. We were just putting it in the ordinance. Our thought was the average wage, you know, can easily, if someone makes a lot of money on one end of the pay scale, for example, you know, when you're getting averages reported, it can really go this way or that way pretty dramatically, whereas if you get the median wage, you're kind of, I think that's what you'd rather have. So that's what we were getting in the reports from them. And then they have to compare that median wage to the average median wage, I think it's, or just the median wage in Davidson County. So we're just making that part of the language in the ordinance. Then another thing that came up was the OSHA or wage theft type issues. We had some language in there. There was an and/or. This was a moment that came up in the Amazon thing where, you know, it said something like Tennessee and/or elsewhere. Basically, we want to know whether you've had it in Tennessee or you've had it anywhere in the country. A lot of companies are moving here, so it's, you know, you may not have had OSHA violations or wage theft in Tennessee. We just want to know if you've had them, generally speaking. So we took the and/or out so that it's very clear whether you've had an OSHA violations, wage theft, that sort of thing. We wanted that language to be very clear. So we thought we would clean that up. There was one other thing, Mr. Jameson, you may know a little more about this. There was this qualified companies as well as qualified projects. It seems very small, but it wasn't really explicit in the language. I don't know if you can help with that one.
Mr. Jameson.
That is correct. So under the current code, you could have a qualified company that was not necessarily on property owned by the IDB, and technically Amazon could have argued that they were not required to submit any of that disclosure information. So we capture all of those in the future by applying the disclosure requirements to both qualified companies and qualified projects going forward.
Right, sort of an underlying, and they of course complied with, you know, they understood the intent of the legislation, and everybody complied. We just wanted to make sure that that's very clear. We wanted to just be covered, you know, again, tightening it up, not really reopening the hood too much or doing anything crazy. I didn't want, you know, stand up on this side or anybody on the other side, you know, to sort of start tweaking with everything. But this is what we thought was illuminated from the process. So, open to questions. I may or may not be able to answer them. Hopefully Mr. Jameson can help us and we can go from there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Councilman Davis. Councilman Mendez.
Thanks. I don't know I thought, Mr. Brown, I thought you were gone. So with the Do Better bill in the first place, Mr. Wilshire expressed a great deal of concern about what the impact would be, and then some of the tensions played out with, just like Councilman Davis just described. Does the administration have a position on this bill?
As Councilman Davis mentioned, we've been working together on the bill. There is one piece that we're still trying to get a agreement on, and I'm working with Councilman Davis on that, and that's the quarterly reporting aspect, as that may vary through different projects and timing on when those quarterly reports versus an annual report. So that's the only area that we're still having thoughts on.
All right, so other than that reporting component, the administration supports this?
Yes.
Okay, and if I may just ask Councilman Davis whether he thinks there's room for still talking about the reporting, or are the parties locked in on their respective positions?
Councilman Davis?
Yeah, we're still continuing that discussion. Obviously, some of the stand-up people were real involved with the original bill. I'm not sure they want to go full annual, but I thought maybe we could kind of bridge the gap. I know we can amend this on third, I believe, again, so we'll keep that discussion going. If hopefully we can continue through second here, but there was. I also would kind of ask you guys too. Would you? It's sort of when y'all want to get the reports. I'm not going to be here next term, but anyway, keep bringing that up. But if you want, if you're okay with less often reporting, that this could be a time to address that. If you guys, you think quarterly is too often, I mean, love to hear from you on that, and we can go from there. The reports are for us, so if it's biannual or annual. Quarterly, semi-annual. Sorry, yeah. I'm definitely open. I think Stand Up had some reasons they thought with pay cycles and stuff like that. They thought if something happened, I guess you could, like annual, may be too long to address it. I think that was the concern with annual, but open to discussion on that.
Councilman Mendez?
Thanks. That answers my question.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Bill is recommended. BL 2019-1708, sponsored Vircher, Bettany, and others, grants a franchise to Zayo Group LLC to construct, operate, and maintain a telecommunication system within Metro Nashville. Is there a motion? Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It may have been last term when we went through a whole lot of exercises about telecommunications and working with planning on having guidelines with regard to obstructing sidewalks and camouflaging and all that. And does anything apply to these at this point, or can they put equipment anywhere now?
See, who do we have?
This is under a separate.
Or am I remembering a different thing?
Director Cooper?
It's a different thing.
So I think what you're talking about is more in the small cell field, and this is just a traditional telecommunications franchise to be able to provide services to commercial customers.
Gotcha. So does that involve any kind of hardware or equipment or anything?
It involves, yes, equipment and lines in the public right-of-way, but not the small cell structures.
The boxes and all that kind of stuff. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Allen. Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vircher. I wonder if the administration could speak to, as Council Lady Allen said, and I understand that this is not a specific to small cell location, but I know there's been a fair amount of consternation in my district with the 5G rollout, and I think, when we first came into office, there was kind of a big wave of telecommunications infrastructure that we were all seeing the impact in our constituents' yards and in the streets and so on and so forth. And so, it seems to me that there is a lot of this underway in Metro, and I'm not really receiving like right-of-way reports and updates and different things like I used to previously. It seems like there's been some sort of breakdown on that. And so I would just be interested from the administration, Public Works, whatever the kind of related department is, to understand how many telecommunications system providers we have operating in Metro, what franchise fees they are paying, and just kind of, where they're working and what they're doing. I would just appreciate an update so I could understand that, that space, please.
I think Public Works would have that information, and we can get that request to them. I don't know if anyone is here today.
Okay. And then can you all speak to, please, I see the note here, Metro would collect a franchise fee of $16,000 per year until Metro performs a new study of its cost related to ownership, management, and maintenance of the public right-of-way and how they should be assigned to organizations and facilities therein. Really glad that we're looking at that. We've needed to do that for a while, and so I'd be interested in an update on that. And then, given that, why are we entering into a 15-year agreement? Should this not then perhaps be a one-year agreement at this agreed-upon price, and then once we get all that reconciled, then we understand? I mean, I would just be interested to know, what does Zayo pay by way of franchise fee in our peer cities? I mean, do we have any kind of analysis on that?
Director Cooper, do we?
Yeah, we can try and get that information. Actually, Terry Costonis, the attorney in our office who handles all franchise stuff, is on vacation, and so she would probably know some of this off the top of her head, but in the meantime, we'll try and get it from Public Works.
I appreciate that. And so where is this in the process then? It's on second, about to come before Public Works?
Correct, this is on second. It will go before Public Works tomorrow, also the Planning and Personnel Committees.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to think if it's best, Chair Vercher, to defer this one meeting here, or if Terry won't be back for Public Works Committee tomorrow.
Terry will not, but her teammate Tara Ladd will be. Somebody will be there at Public Works from legal tomorrow.
And will Tara be able to speak to this knowledgeably?
I will see what I can do between now and tomorrow to make sure she has that information.
Okay, and then I guess, though, Councilman Cooper, or not Councilman Cooper, Law Director Cooper, I apologize. As it relates specifically to the franchise fee, which is why it is before us now, can you speak to why, if we're about to undergo this study to make sure we're addressing this all appropriately, that we are entering into a 15-year agreement?
The franchise ordinance and the code may specify, I'm not sure, but I can have an answer for tomorrow. As far as why it's 15 years, I don't know the answer to that today.
Okay. Well, Chair Lady, I'm happy to support this, but could we have it re-referred here, please?
Make the motion.
I'd like to move approval with a re-referral to Budget and Finance so we could have a better understanding of the franchise fee space, please.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve with a re-referral back to Budget and Finance? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, bill is approved on second with a re-referral back to Budget and Finance. Thank you so much, Budget and Finance Committee members. We are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.